I would encourage you, if you want to dive really deep into criminal and juvenile justice data, I invite you to visit our website. It's called dcjset.net. And it has data on violent crime trends, violent crime arrests that we update monthly, also quarterly dashboards on the full spectrum of the juvenile justice as well as criminal justice system. So I invite you to take a look at that website. The third thing we do, we facilitate interagency collaboration. So at any point in time, the CJCC is facilitating about 15 committees and work groups, and those are across our priority areas. Some of the work groups govern that system I mentioned that facilitates real-time information sharing. Other work groups focus on violent crime, substance abuse and mental health issues for justice-involved persons, reentry, and today we're going to talk about juvenile justice. And the fourth thing we do, we facilitate training and technical assistance for partners and stakeholders in the criminal justice and juvenile justice community and systems. And so the way that we do our training and technical assistance, we host webinars. We actually had a webinar earlier this week where we talked about the professional development for community violence intervention workers. And then we have public meetings like we're having tonight. And the focus of our public meetings is to really help the public understand how the criminal and juvenile justice systems actually work. The public has been very engaged in conversations about public safety in the justice system, and we want to make sure the public is informed when we're having those conversations. These opportunities also let the public engage directly with the leaders of our criminal and juvenile justice systems. So tonight, this is actually our second public meeting of the year. We're going to be focusing on juvenile supervision. So juveniles who end up in the juvenile justice system, and then they are released or made released pre-trial. Who's supervising them? And what does that supervision entail? And then for juveniles who end up maybe getting convicted of their crimes or adjudicated for their offenses, what happens to them? Some of them may be released in the community. Who's supervising them? What does that supervision entail? Some of them may end up in a facility. What are those facilities? What are the types of programs that are available in the rehabilitation program? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But before we dive in, we are here in person at the DC Dream Center in Ward 7 in Southeast. I'm so grateful that Director Ernest Clover has opened this space for us to have this meeting. So I just want to invite him up just to offer a few words of welcome and just kind of set the tone and set the stage for tonight.
Thank you. So awesome to have you guys here. And thank you all for joining us here at the DC Dream Center in person and virtually. We have been here for 28 years in our community. We got started in the Southeast White House, and it's a house on wheels for all people. You're alive and breathing and come in the front door. While, yes, I'm executive director here, I'm also pastor, one of the pastors of the National Community Church. So it's awesome to be able to see our faith at work in the community. And so when Chrissy had asked, like, hey, can we come here? I'm like, this is exactly what we're about. Because I can run through our programs. Yes, you have a mentoring program, you have an after school program, you have summer camp, you have basketball here, taekwondo, it's normally here, but during the dance studio downstairs, can dancing, all these other things. These things are free. We are truly a community center, modeling to our community like, hey, there's still good people in the world, and there's still people who really want to help you reach your God-given potential. And that's why we're here at the Dream Center. So we're talking about juvenile justice system and what's happening with our youth. I'm thinking about tonight, we have, for example, we have a group called Sons of God. We have a group of young men, one in particular, cooking class. That's his touch point for us. We just graduated about another 9 children from our cooking class. Their graduation cooking protocols will go out on the streets and serve people experiencing homelessness. And so I'm looking at someone who's done that, who's come to VBS, who's now come to Sons of God, or we're talking about life and what's going on. And I'm like, this is what it takes as a community. So my admonishment to community members is that we are responsible. I know it's very easy to look at anyone who has director role in their name or has any power that, yes, let's hold those individuals accountable, whoever they may be. But at the end of the day, and this is our community, these are our children. These are returning citizens who need to come back home. They're not being shipped from somewhere else. This is their community. So we have to be a part of the solution. And that is why the Dream Center is here. This is us saying, hey, we know it takes one person at a time for them to reach their God-given potential, and we fill in that gap. That's what we do here at the Dream Center. So if that's your life, if you're about that, please be with us. Get online, take a look, go www.dcdreamcenter.com. You can see what it is. We're on social and all other places, so you can see who we are. But I really want to encourage you. I know we all can throw rocks, but we are about solutions. And thank you, Chrissy, for saying that, because I really want to encourage our community that let's come up with some solutions. So thank you very much and welcome to our house.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernest. All right, we're going to get started. So tonight we have, I mentioned we're going to talk about juvenile supervision. And for those who may not be familiar, the District of Columbia has a very unique structure to its criminal and juvenile justice systems. We are not a state here in the District of Columbia, and therefore the federal government does have some level of jurisdiction of the affairs in the district. And in the late 90s, there was a law that was passed by Congress. It's called the Revitalization Act, for short. And the Revitalization Act actually transitioned many of the functions of the district's justice system to the federal government. And so our local justice system is a hybrid of local District of Columbia government agencies, as well as federal or federally funded agencies. So tonight, we have Director Terri Odom, and she is with the Court Social Services Division of the DC Superior Court. And Director Odom serves in the capacity of both pre-trial supervision for our young people, as well as probation for our young people. And then we have Director Sam Abed, who is with the district government. So we have both a federally funded entity and a district government entity. And Director Abed serves both a pretrial and a post-adjudication function as well. So just a few words about both of them. And Director Odom, if you're in the juvenile justice system, you know Director Odom. And the reason for that is that she has been serving in this capacity since 2005. And if you also know her, you know she has a heart for young people in the city and specifically in the District of Columbia. And Director Odom, I had to look up what did she do before she came in this position because she's been such a stalwart in the District of Columbia for so long. But she has served as Deputy Administrator in the District's Youth Services Administration, which was a predecessor to the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services and our Child and Family Services Agency. And then prior to that, she served as Director of Mental Health Policy and Planning for the National Mental Health Association. Director Odom comes with a wealth of experience in juvenile justice, children's mental health, substance abuse treatment, as well as HIV and AIDS education prevention. So we're so happy to have Director Odom with us tonight. And then we have Director Sam Abed, who's sort of the newish kid on the block, that has been with the district government since June 2023. And he most recently served as Secretary of the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services from 2011 to 2023. So you're hearing these dates. Both of these leaders have been steeped and invested in the juvenile justice system for a really long time. This is something that they care about, and I have to imagine it's within their heart. And during that time in Maryland, Director Abed was appointed as the chair of statewide and national juvenile justice reform committees. And then Mr. Abed also served as Chief Deputy Director for Virginia's Department of Juvenile Justice, as well as the Commonwealth's Attorney in Virginia. So again, a lot of experience here, and we're going to learn more about what they do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sit back for a little bit, and we're going to start with Director Odom. She's just going to give us a general overview of the Court Social Services Division. the nature of the work. I may have a couple of questions, then I'm going to turn to Director Abed and ask for the same thing. He'll give us an overview of DRS and the type of work they do, the supervision they provide our youth. I may have a few more questions, and then we're going to open up to you, both those who are in person as well as online. So please get your questions ready, get your phone out, get your notes app, and take notes of whatever questions you may have, because this is a public meeting. This is your opportunity to engage with these leaders and learn more about what they do. So with that, Director Odom.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, so I want to begin by saying good afternoon or good evening, and I want to extend greetings on behalf of the District of Columbia Courts, which encompasses our Court of Appeals, which would be a state Supreme Court, our court systems, and our Superior Court, which is our trial court. And I want to welcome our young people who are here in the back, because you are why we're here, right? If we get it right. If we get it right, then our gatherings going forward are continuously more solution focused. I do want to say to everyone again, thank you for joining us. And before I actually make my remarks, I want to acknowledge our clerk of the court, Ms. Sabrina Denson, Esquire, who is here. She is the first female to serve in the role of clerk of the court, and in that regard, the entire Superior Court reports under her, and she is joined by the deputy clerk of the court, Ms. Tamara Robinson. And we also have our deputy director here, Ms. Camille Tucker. I do want to just kind of help folks put a few things in context, because a lot of times when we think about how our branches of government work, there is a tendency, because our funding comes from Congress, to see it through a federal lens, but actually statutorily, we are a state agency. So that, yes, the board is funded by Congress, but it is by statute, the third branch of government, and under the separations of power, it can determine, you know, whether it chooses to operate with a local system, using a local system, or a federal or a hybrid of the two. In many ways, the district's juvenile justice system mirrors 51% of the jurisdictions in America, where we're more like Virginia, where you have a county system of probation on the adult side and juvenile. New York has that. New Jersey has, we can go up and down the across the country with it. But there, you are correct, Director Love, that we do have states like Maryland where it's all under an executive branch, and then we have other municipalities where it's sort of a county state function. And in that regard, our system models that. Court social services by statute is charged as the pretrial and post-disposition entity for the District of Columbia when it comes to adolescents who are coming in contact with or involved with our family court system, our juvenile justice system. So if you think about it where the adult role is concerned, you have pretrial services, right, dealing with the individual before an adjudication, and then you have the court services and offender supervision agency, CJCC, which would work with the individual once there's been a finding, a plea, right, a conviction. And so we have both of those responsibilities. What I think is unique about how our system operates is that it's built in a way that it enshrines collaboration. Because the Director Abed with the DYRS, he is responsible for operating the Youth Services Center, 1000 Olivet Road, and the congregate care homes, which serve as the shelter homes that are uniquely dispensed throughout the District of Columbia. So in that regard, we share some front-end responsibilities. If a youth does not touch YSC in any way, if a youth is not placed in shelter home, then they would not touch the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. And subsequent to a disposition, if the youth is committed, that youth will go under the supervision of the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services and no longer be under the span of supervision and responsibility for court social services. So roughly about 70–75% of the youth that are interfacing in our system are going to be under court social services division supervision, right? What we call the pre-stage of adjudication, right, during the trial, and then on the back end. And I'll talk a little bit about how we're structured, because I know, and I'll try to be very brief, because I know we want to get into the exchange where you as the audience, and indeed, I think we have about 100 people who signed up, and so they're probably going to want to weigh in and exchange with communication. But ultimately, when a young person is alleged to have violated the law for a delinquent matter. And this is in keeping with the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Act that was originally ratified in, I believe it was 1974, and it's been reauthorized, I believe now 6 times subsequent to that. And the cornerstone of that federal act is that an adolescent wouldn't be charged for anything to which if he or she were an adult, they wouldn't be charged for, right? And so on delinquent matter, crime, that youth would actually, in interfacing with any of the law enforcement entities, if the decision was that the alleged offense required further response in the system, that youth would be transferred to MPD, or MPD would respond and make the arrest. That youth would be processed by the Metropolitan Police Department on Hay Street in the youth division. And then MPD, if it's a misdemeanor, has the discretion by law to say, go forth and sin no more, or here's when we want to give you a citation to come back to court. But the vast majority of those young people don't even go forward with the formal process, right? So when a Metropolitan Police Department transports a youth to us, and our intake shop is working 24 hours a day. We have a day intake office down at the historic Moultrie Courthouse, and then we have our evening, midnight, and weekend intake probation officers that are staffed at the Youth Services Center, 1000 Mahoney Road. And that's where we're going to receive the young person. We do the initial risk assessment instrument, the social summary background. We run the COMR, which is a baseline behavioral health screening. We also run a what we call sex trafficking assessment review. This is a screening tool to determine whether the youth has been a victim of or exposed to human trafficking exploitation. The goal is to do these baseline screenings because statutorily we have an obligation to interface with our charging entity at the local level, which is the Office of the Attorney General. And in Rule 102 and 103, it requires a consultation. We have to say to OEG, we think the charges should go forward or that we don't. We have to say whether we think detention is necessary or we don't. We have to say whether we think congregate care, a shelter is necessary or we don't. The statute is very clear that while that consultation is needed, the ultimate decision on whether that case is going to be charged is the discretion to the Office of the Attorney General. The ultimate decision on moving forward with the recommendation for detention rests with our Attorney General. And so through these different responsibilities, as the case moves, so the case is now going to go forward, and that at that point, that case is within, I would say, 48 to 72 hours of being presented in new referral JM15. It's going to be assigned to a supervision probation officer. We have 8 teams co-located in 6 locations. We'll talk a little bit more about that a little later in terms of where we're located, but I will say that we are strategically located across all 4 of the quadrants in the District of Columbia: Northwest, Southwest, Northeast, Southeast. And that youth being assigned to a probation officer is likely going to be required during the pretrial phase to come to our pretrial programming in our balanced and restorative justice drop-in centers, where a big focus of what we do is behavioral health services, tutoring. We also do mentoring. We do a lot of indoor activity with our youth and a lot of outdoor community activity. And through that phase, we're trying to gather information. We're going to be doing family group conferences so that we can have family structured decision-making, bringing the family together, trying to identify what are the needs of the young person. What are the strengths, assets, weaknesses, and threats that's pressing against this youth's ability to thrive? Who within the family can dedicate time and resources? Because we live at a time that's not very different than it has been for the last 4 or 5 decades. I think if we did a survey, most of us grew up in a home where either both of our parents or at least one of our parents were working. And that can make it difficult in terms of being available. So once we do that FPC and we come up with that pretrial plan and we're working to put things together, the youth is in the bars drop-in center 30 to 60 days. As that case moves forward, they're going to step down into a status. Typically, it's going to either be a deferred disposition agreement or it can be a post-disposition of probation, which is the sentence, and it can be a commitment to DYRS. We have a child guidance behavioral clinic, the Child Guidance Center. We are one of very few probation departments for adolescents that have a comprehensive child guidance center. We have 5 full-time psychologists. We have 3 postdoctoral interns, and we're doing all of the non-medical assessment and evaluation: psychological, psychoeducational, neuropsychological, clinical risk assessments, clinical sex, assault assessments. We also operate a behavioral health program for youth that are, adjudicated for, sex offenders, for sex offenses, I should say. And, that is something that was developed in-house, right? So a number of the screening tools that we use are the standard within the industry, but a number of them we've also developed. And not only developed them, we're working with our strategic management division. We have also brought them to scale. The evidence shows that the tools that we have developed do in fact work, and we share them and are sharing them with other municipalities and even other agencies. So I think the thing that I want to start with and hope that I impart upon you is that in the District of Columbia, we have what we think is a pro-social approach to working with young people. It is solution focused. It is not deficit based. The vast majority of young people are not going to be detained. On any given day, the vast majority of our population, anywhere from 80 to 85, sometimes 90% of our population, they are in the community. And we do understand in a compact jurisdiction and municipality like the District of Columbia, where oftentimes the proximity between the person who transgressed in the offense and the victim who experienced it is not a large gap of space. And I think, and I'm hoping that in the dialogue tonight, we will begin to move into a conversation that affirms that young people are going to make mistakes, right? We were all young, right? We're going to test the limits. And sometimes those young people in getting in trouble will not be able to be rehabilitated from the point of the charging in court in the community. We may have to have them in a secure environment, but the vast majority of our young people won't be there. And how do we ready our community? How do we challenge and call upon our community to embrace the approach that we are using? And then lastly, I do want to say I want to again thank CJCC for convening this forum. And I do want to say how refreshing it is to work with you, Director Abed, and your approach and your partnership. It is certainly URS and Court Social Services are bound together in our statutory responsibility. And I think that the way that we work together as directors, it trickles down into how our staff work together. And so I am pleased to basically be working with you.
Thank you, Director Odom. And it's good to hear that, especially as the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. It's good to hear when our partners are coordinating well. So Director Odom, and I appreciate you elaborating more on how the system works. So here we have 2 prosecutors in the district. We have the U.S. Attorney's Office that prosecutes adults. Sometimes young people are charged as adults if they are alleged to have committed very serious offenses. And then we have the Office of the Attorney General, which for the most part is the juvenile prosecutor here in the district. And I appreciate because, we hear a lot about if a young person's arrested, there are in general 3 options. The court can decide to release them, send them to a shelter house, or send them to the youth services center. And thank you, Director Odom, for clarifying that you do risk assessments. You do that make recommendations to the court on where the young people should be placed in trial. So now I'm going to turn to Director Abed, who can tell us a bit about and give us an overview of DRS.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Director Odom, for that really great overview. Before I launch in, I do want to acknowledge some of my team members that are here. Most of them are gathered in the back there, but we have Deputy Director Doug Moeller, we have Chief of Staff LaShonda Hill, we have our Public Information Officer Kenisha Fish, Dr. Fish, and we have one of our hearings officer, Judge Charles Thomas, right there in the back row. So thank you all for being here and supporting us. I don't want to review the things that Director Odom already did. I think she gave a good overview of the system. I'll just recap a little bit. You have the front end of the system. So when a young person engages with the police and they are charged with an offense, they go to the intake portion of the system. Once that intake phase has sorted through what's going to happen next, whether they get diverted, whether they get charged, and whether they get detained generally. That's where we come in generally at DYRS. So Director Odom mentioned the Youth Services Center. That is one of 2 facilities that DYRS operates. The Youth Services Center is a detention center. And it is different from the other facility that we operate called New Beginnings, which is a treatment center. So I want to just talk a little bit about what we do at YSC and what we do at New Beginnings, and then get into some of the community work that we do with supervision and with other community supports that we have. At YSC, at the detention center, these are primarily beds for young people that are awaiting their trials. So if they are determined ultimately by the court, there is that whole process that you mentioned, Director Odom, about doing risk assessments, having the Attorney General weigh in, make recommendations, the court will make a decision. If they are detained, they will come to the youth services. And within that center, we have a number of subpopulations. So we do have youth that are awaiting trial, pre-trial youth. We have youth that are awaiting trial in the adult court. Those are Title 16 youth, commonly known as Title 16 youth. These are youth charged as adults, and statutorily, we have to house them separately from other youth. And then we have youth that are committed to the department, awaiting placement at a treatment facility. Those are the main subpopulations that we have at YSC. And at YSC, we have those youth for varying periods of time. Sometimes kids come in overnight and they go back out. Sometimes they come in. Pretrial status can last, a varying amount of time, and then they can wait as well a period of time awaiting placement. So while they're with us at YSC, we are doing education. Like we have a school run by the Maya Angelou Academy that provides education services consistent with the standards of the District of Columbia. And we have behavioral health staff that work with young people. This is not a treatment-focused type of intervention. This is a different type of intervention to stabilize young people, prepare them for what they're going to be seeing in court. Young people in detention typically have a lot of anxiety because there's a lot of things that they don't know. They don't know what's going to happen with their case. And so we try to give them supports there. And we also have partnership with an organization called Parent Watch. And Parent Watch is a very important part of our operation, particularly at YSC, because it is a liaison between the agency and parents for youth that are in our facilities. And it's important to have an advocate for our young people who can go meet with kids, meet with their parents, identify issues that we need to resolve, and then bring those issues straight to the leadership of the agency so that we can work on those together. If a young person is ultimately adjudicated delinquent for an offense, that's the equivalent of being convicted of a crime in the adult system, then they would move into that awaiting placement status, and then we will look for a placement either with our own facility, New Beginnings, the one that we operate, or with an array of private providers that we contract with. And so we have an assessment process that we use to evaluate young people. Of course, there have been a lot of evaluations that have already been completed. We get a lot of that information from social services, from the Department of Behavioral Health. And we convene a team to review what the needs of the youth are, and what resources we may need to put into a plan and develop that plan, and then go seek that placement. I want to talk a little bit about New Beginnings specifically because that's the one that we operate. We do have a range of placements like residential treatment centers for kids that need psychiatric treatment centers that we contract with. We use foster care placements. There are young people that come to us, even though they may be involved in the criminal justice system, that are needing foster care because that is the primary problem in their life, the challenge that they need to overcome. We contract with EPROMs and other providers as well. At New Beginnings, that is a secure facility. So typically who will be looking to place in New Beginnings are you at the higher end of the spectrum. And these are young people that are committed for offenses that are either with more chronicity, they've had more offenses, or that they've had higher level offenses. So it is a secure facility, and we are a treatment-focused facility there. So we will have, of course, behavioral health services. We develop a treatment plan, a success plan for that young person. They, of course, also have education provided by the same provider that works at YSC, so there's continuity between their education programs. If they're at YSC, they go to New Beginnings, and they engage in treatment services while they're with us. Once they are through their treatment services, when they've completed their goals, that's when our community team will kick in, and we will develop a community placement agreement. Community placement agreement will be an agreement between the young person and the agency, detailing what other steps do we need to take to either complete your services, but sometimes we need to have some follow-up services for young people in the community, and then what other supports do we need to put in place to give you the best chance of success. And so we articulate all those again with a team approach. We work with our staff at the beginnings, treatment staff, develop that plan, and our care coordination staff. And the young people then get transitioned back into the community. Sometimes that means going back home. Sometimes that could mean going into another type of placement, like an independent living program for older young people. We can pull people until they're 21. So somebody that is approaching that age may not be best served by going back into their home. They want to be independent, give them supports so that they can get job training, get a job, and the independent living programs give them a place to live where they have support, but they can learn the skills that they need to be independent. When we get into the community placement agreements, these are things that we develop and we sign with the parent generally and with the young person. And we can continue providing services for young people up until they're 24. And that's one thing that I think is unique about our system that I haven't seen in other systems around the country. Typically, 21 is the end of jurisdiction for the juvenile justice system in most places. And it is here too, except that we can continue to provide services voluntarily for young people up until they're 24. So we don't have, the young person doesn't have that obligation to engage with us, but they can come back and get supportive services. And the primary delivery of those services is through our achievement centers. And we have 2 achievement centers in the district. One is at 450 H Street, which is our headquarters. And the other one is on MLK at 2101 MLK Junior Drive in Southeast. And so you can interface our agency at either one of those places. So young people that are in the community under a community placement agreement are required to engage with services among things that they have in their plans at our achievement centers. But young people can drop in if they want to, even if they're not part of our system. So a person that's not committed to us, that just wants to come in and get a hot meal, can come in and get a hot meal at our achievement center. If they want to look for job training, if they want to look for other types of supportive services that we offer there, they can drop in anytime up until the age of 24. And we have a number of programs that we operate there. The one that's coming up that I'd like to highlight for everybody is the Summer Youth Employment Program, or SYEP. This is a district-wide initiative, a number of agencies that participate, Department of Employment Services, the Department of Parks and Recreation have a lot of programs in there too. The school systems have a wide array of programming for young people in the schools. And DYRS also participates in the Summer Youth Program. And once the school year ends, we sort of transition into that summer programming activity, and we have specific vendors. We haven't finalized the procurements of those. Very close to finalizing those. In the past, we've used services. We've done a robotics program, which was very popular last year. We bring up people train them in these different areas and really expose them to the different career opportunities that they have. Separate from SYEP, Summer Youth Employment Program, we also operate a program called Volt Academy. So when we're not in the summer programming, throughout the year, Volt Academy continues those employment trainings. So these are job development types of programs that we do. The most recent one that we did was with a company here in the district called First Choice Masonry. And that is a district-owned, family-owned business, multi-generation family business here. And these are it's a wonderful family that runs this business. They have built their business on their own, pulled themselves up through their own bootstraps, and they've been very successful and want to give back. And so they've been great partners with us. But we have other partners as well that we use. And we survey our kids to find out what types of training are you interested in. And then we want to make sure that we also evaluate, okay, you may be interested in music videos or doing songs, and we do have music programs and video production, but we also want to open opportunities for young people where we have those jobs to try to direct them into those avenues as well. So at the achievement centers, at those two locations, I'm going to give you a contact person. For the Achievement Center or for the employment programs, Phyllis Powell, it's PHYLLIS.POWELL. Anyone here, I can give it to you again at dc.gov. And our phone number is 202-251-5847. And all of these phone numbers are available on our website. You can find all of this information on the website. DYRS. So I'll stop there and we can go ahead and take questions.
All right, thank you both for very comprehensive overviews of your agencies and work that you do. We did get one clarification question from online. Each of you talked about doing assessments, specifically risk assessments. Could you just briefly explain what is a risk assessment?
Absolutely. So a risk assessment is an instrument that is designed to gather information as it relates to the nature of the charges, right? And it groups them in categories. And the District of Columbia, like the vast majority of municipalities, assigns points to charges. So misdemeanors are 4 points, felonies are 8 points, and then you have the higher felonies for 12 points, and then you have the most serious that are 16 points. And what the instrument does is it looks at an individual who has, in fact, if this is the first contact, you would score based off of the official legal arresting instrument or document, which is the 379 from the Metropolitan Police Department. And so we would score and apply the instrument based on what the charges are listed, with the top charge being the most serious. And then if there is a prior history, the instrument is designed so that you can take that into account. If there's a current adjudication, if there's a current status, and from that instrument, ultimately what you arrive at is a risk range classification. Low risk is 0 points to 9, medium risk is 10 points to 15, high risk is 16 plus. The instrument is a guide, it is a tool that it drives, it informs the decisions that are actually made in terms of a recommendation from court social services. But I always like to explain to individuals where the risk assessment is concerned. And let me just also say, our instrument was validated some years ago by the National, I'm gonna give you the currently, Evident Change. Evident Change is a nationally recognized agency that has worked with a number of municipalities in validating their risk assessment instruments. And so we're currently undergoing a revalidation of the instrument. And it allows you to basically look at, does the instrument do what it's supposed to do, right? Does it provide the guide? Is it, and the evidence is the data that is actually whole. But
Director Odom, sorry, if you could explain, you're assessing risks of what? Risks that they made or what?
That's exactly where I was going to go. The instrument is intended to inform whether there is a higher probability that an individual would reoffend, whether there is a higher probability that an individual, if we're released, would not return to court for their court hearings and process. Because when you think about the use of pretrial detention, those are the two primary reasons you're looking to ensure the individual doesn't reoffend, and you're looking to ensure that they will show up and report. But I want to underscore one thing, and then I'll pause. Numbers in and of itself are not the greatest predictive factor, because remember, this is an arresting document 379. If a misdemeanor is 4 points, and you have in fact 5 misdemeanors, that would give you what, 20 points. So if the instrument was designed to say that 16 points or above was a holding factor, you would be detained as a basically low-risk individual. So the instrument, when I say it's guide, it allows for, and this is where we always like to speak about the importance of having experience, well-trained, and we do have them in our intake probation offices across our probation department, because our probation officers are trained to know when to override and bring in the experience, because we don't want to hold a low-risk person, right? And by low risk, we mean in terms of the nature of the offense, not the numeric value. At the same time, you could have someone with a score of 15, right? It can be based on possession of a weapon and, right, a gun and ammunition, right? And so those that 7 and 4 would give you 11. And if there were another misdemeanor charge to that, that would give you 15. And we might override and actually hold that person going into court the next day because we've got a weapon, we've got some other indicators. So it is a guide, it is a tool that helps give you a preliminary look at risk implications. Again, where release is concerned, but the instruments can be used along the continuum of adjudication. It can inform the level of supervision. It can inform certain conditions when you're in the community. And that's one of the things we're so excited in working with Evidence Change, because we're looking to not just come out of it with a revalidated instrument for initial decision-making, but we're looking for to develop a risk needs instrument that will also provide a guide for our probation officers where supervision and other services are concerned.
So yeah, Evidence Change used to be the National Council of Crime and Delinquency, which is the oldest nonprofit organization dedicated to criminal justice reform, and they're an excellent. So it contrasts to the detention risk assessment instrument that Director Odom was talking about, which is the structured decision tool to guide decision making. The assessments that we will primarily rely on, you have the psychological assessments that get done by psychologists, but mental health professionals, and if they were diagnosed with a DSM, that's something that we need to address in treatment plans. But the primary tool that we use is called the Youth Level of Service, or the ILS, and that is a strengths and needs assessment. So it's different in that it's an inventory of strengths and needs, looking at different domains in a youth and their family. So we're looking a little more broadly there and trying to determine what do we need to put in that plan to address some of those needs, and where can we sort of lean on the strengths that a young person has or a family has to tailor that plan for them. And so that is a lot more involved in terms of the number of questions, and then it gets processed with all of the other information that we get from our health providers to guide our planning for their commitment. So what is their treatment plan? What should the treatment plan look like? What do we need to address in those various domains to address their needs?
And then a couple of questions. Director Odom, the young person is under your supervision, the pre-trial, pre-adjudication phase. About how long is that?
Typically, we're looking, I believe, at somewhere between 30 to 60 days. And that is informed by the fact that within the tools in our toolbox, we have deferred disposition of means, which can also accelerate getting from the point of the actual trial, right, and the charging into the actual agreement. So, I think we began to see, was it 2021, we saw the numbers going up in terms of a lot more utilization of deferred disposition agreements, which have conditions in it. Initially, they were typically like 6 months, but increasingly, our Office of the Attorney General has been looking at potentially longer time periods, 8 months, 12 months, in some cases, even beyond a year. And so we have the youth who are under the deferred disposition agreement, and we have the youth that are also under, probation. So where our youth that are in pretrial detention are concerned, those timelines can be a bit long because they involve obviously more serious crimes, and that touches into a host of things. When we look at what type of services we're going to be recommending, what is in the disposition, and I do want to acknowledge Dr. Katara Law, our chief psychologist, and she is in the rear of the room, and she heads up the child guidance clinic, but a lot is informed into that timeline, right? And while we don't want to prolong it because there is a body of data that really underscores the loss that can happen the longer it takes to get to a finding of involvement, because we don't use words like convicted or innocent leaders involved or not involved in our world. At the same time, the literature makes it clear that it is important that you use the various screening tools that we talked about in assessments, because this is the opportunity to find out what, in fact, are the needs of the young people. National data makes clear, and it has for more than 3 decades, that anywhere between 70 to 75, 80% of young people coming into the juvenile system have either at least one behavioral health issue or more that either was undiagnosed before their court involvement, or it was diagnosed but untreated. So a big part of what's driving that is to get at what do we need to do in the service plan.
So, and then Director Abed, I want to ask the same question. So just, and thank you, I was using sort of generic terms of conviction, but yes, found involved. So when a young person is found involved, there are 2 options. The court can order them to probation, or they can order them, and that's with court social services, or committed. And so Director Abed, about how long would a committed youth on average stay with the URS?
It really depends on the type of commitment. So youth that are awaiting a psychiatric residential treatment facility placement typically stay longer and can wait months to get into a placement. That's an area that we have discussed in our CJCC. We don't have a PRT, it's the acronym. We have that facility with the district. So we have to go out of state for all of the services for the district. And in addition to being completely reliant on private providers, we also have to go through the interstate compact, which is another process. When the place gets out of state, there has to be determination, there's placement for them within the district. And so there are a lot of other steps that cause those delays. They're going into a placement like New Beginnings, where we have a facility that they can be much shorter, or if they want to move them, that's the mistake.
But about how long are they with, regardless of placement, about how long are they in DRS's care?
It's a few months awaiting placement, but it can range a lot higher on the PRTF side. And of course, my goal is to have that for below 30 days. Say that is our goal. Deputy Director of the very said. And so what we need to do is develop an array of private providers, because New Beginnings is the only placement that we operate, and that's a 50-bed facility. Today, we have 165 kids committed to the department. So the majority of our kids, we must rely on those private providers. It isn't just having the number of beds available, it's having the right mix of beds. So if a young person is ordered to a PRTF, they can't put them in a group home in the space of a group home or a residential treatment center. And that's what becomes more challenging. So we're working diligently to find new providers. Unfortunately, for a lot of them, we do have to go out of the district to find those, but we want to find them as close as we can. So we really are focusing our search out genuinely to try to find these private providers.
Okay, so I'm gonna transition to the audience, both in person and online, to see if there are any questions. And sir, I see we have a hand right here. If you could try to wait to get the microphone. We may pass the microphone around. Because we want to make sure those online actually hear the questions. So it's coming your way, sir.
It's a first attempt, and then it'll be community service. And it will be community service at first attempt.
Community service can be a part of any adjudication, a first, a second. In fact, if I am correct, I believe with each adjudication, it is legally required. It's a certain amount of time.
Is there any plans, like the long-term plans for expanding the facility in the bed space, considering that's not going to be there, like the number of beds is limited at YC, is limited at beginnings, and you're seeing the need for more, and the need is not going to go away. So what are the long-term plans for servicing these kids, not just at the beginnings, but potentially building PRTs, expanding the bed space, say in the district or close to the district, but we're not sending our children, paying a lot of money actually to send our children out of state.
Yeah, so there is discussion in district government specifically about trying to construct a PRTF within the district or at our campus in New Beginnings. So New Beginnings is actually in Laurel, Maryland, but it is district-owned land, and I believe it's about 800 acres of land out here. And so that is certainly a potential site. But what I'll say about construction is that it is a very long-term project, and it is not something that happens quickly. So while that conversation is happening, we are still going to need to find partners in the private provider sector to meet our needs today.
And in the back there.
Good evening. I'm Pastor Tony. I have the privilege of working with a lot of our young men throughout our city. And about 6 months ago, and I'm trying to get these guys just to understand, we had a 15-year-old who committed a felony. He had his 10-year-old brother. So called for the arrest and they took both in. Can you tell us what that process looked like from start to finish? Because I haven't seen the 10-year-old. I've just been too busy, but it's like, I know they didn't lock him up. Can you explain so they can understand? Because some of them have friends who take people along with them and they don't know what happens. So when a crime is committed, what happens to that younger person, which is about their age? That makes sense?
Well, here's what I would say, and I want to try to be brief because I'm mindful of the time. As I understand the law, a youth that is 12 years or under would not have been formally arrested.
I think MPD, the arresting officer would have to call, maybe the commander or,
Would have to call the commander and then engage in what's called consultative, a consultative discussion with the, office of the Attorney General. But the probability of someone who would be 10 years old, 11 years old, is that they would not likely be arrested, but it depends on the nature of the offense, right? I guess if I'm trying to respond to your question, and it's a very important question, what message do we want to say to our young people? We want to say to you that you really want to be aware of who your friends are, who you surround yourself around, that you want to basically recognize that you have a voice and you have the ability to say, I'm not going to go along with that. I'm not going to be a part of it. Because sometimes what starts off as a good idea, hey, let's go and hang out, right? We're chilling during the day, we get hungry, right? Not everybody has money. Hey, let's go to the 7-Eleven. And their chips are our chips, right? Their hot dogs are our hot dogs, right? And you just see how it can escalate. Then it's, oh, somebody wants to go to a party. Hey, that's a good idea. We don't have a car. So I think that what becomes important is that we as adults really have to check in with our young people to really look at who their peer groups are, who they're associating with. And I'm not saying it's a foolproof, single magic way to prevent anything, but a lot of it really comes down to being able to make sound choices and being able to know that it is your choice. It is not just your choice, it's your obligation, because you represent you, you represent your family. And if someone is asking you to do something that you know is not right, it is better to assert yourself and to just find that courage to say, I'm not going to be a part of that. Because our system ebbs and flows, and you have seen this, Director Love. And so while we have a law that discourages arresting and prosecuting individuals 11 and under, that can change. If the wave of crime is as such that the community feels like this kind of gentler approach is not working. And so I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I am saying to our young people that we really want to be supportive to you and to empower you, encourage you to be able to make sound decisions. And it can be tough and it can be scary, but you have the power and you have the courage to do it.
Thank you. Now I have a couple more questions from online. One is a follow-up to the discussion you shared, Director Abed, about we don't have, certain types of treatment facilities here in the district. So the question is approximately how many youth a year are sent out of state for treatment? And then what's the average cost per youth to do so? And I think you both experienced that issue in terms of sometimes having to place young people under your supervision in out-of-state facilities.
I probably need to dig into that number to give you an annual number, but it's a significant number of kids that go out of state. That is not, it's not a small number. In terms of costs, I don't think it's much different than if they were staying in the district with another private provider. They're expensive services either way. I think the difficulty for me is when we send kids out of the district are the complexities of doing that. They're further away from home, further away from their families. Sometimes being away from the community isn't a bad thing if they have a lot of negative peer groups and other things, but it does make it more difficult to maintain family connections and maintain oversight. And then there are all the other sort of bureaucracy related matters that go along with that.
Did you have a follow-up on that, Director Odom? Do you find it's a similar situation in terms of out-of-state placements?
Well, only to say that for us, most of our kids will be going to the psychiatric residential, the PRTF, the psychiatric residential treatment facility, and that would involve Medicaid and behavioral health and insurance, either through managed care or direct fee for service. And so we don't have a budget for the direct placement.
Okay. And then another question for both of you: what happens if a young person under your supervision or care commits a crime? How do your agencies respond?
So, I'll start. So we do have young people. Obviously, we're the end of the system. We're the deepest part of the system. And so when a young person gets committed to us, they've already gone through all of the front end interventions. They've been screened for diversion, they've been screened for deferred disposition. They may have even been offered those opportunities and continue to move forward through probation and to commitment. We do get kids that get committed directly to us without any of those other interventions. Typically, those are going to be much higher level offenses like homicide, serious robbery, that type of offense. We do have young people that commit offenses while they're committed with us. Typically, we'll see assaults or against other youth or against staff, and we take a case-by-case approach on those. You have to recognize that these young people are already incarcerated, so charging them again has very limited value. That said, if it is a serious assault, that is something that we will support rebooking and charging that young person with. And then I also have to say, if it is that crime is committed, even if the agency says, okay, we're not going to pursue it, any individual that is the victim of a crime can pursue a charge. So those do happen, and we see that frequency sometimes being pretty high. What we try to do is work with those young people and resolve their differences, resolve their conflicts, so that we can, when we place them back in the community, they're not still engaging in that sort of retribution we see unfortunately play out in our communities.
What about young people who are in the community and commit a new offense? Is your response any different?
Well, generally, if they're committing an offense in the community, they're going to be arrested by MPD. So there will be a new charge, and then there will be a revocation that also occurs with that. So, again, I think the courts are cognizant that it's, sort of 6 one way, half a dozen the other. We can bring them back into a facility as part of that revocation, but the court will still have to dispose of that new charge as well.
What about you, Director Odom?
I agree with everything Director Abed said. I think that there are 2 points that I want to make in response to that question. The first of which is that because of the way our programming is set up with the Balance and Restorative Drop-In Center and our SOARS initiative, which I'll speak to kind of in a little later, our staff are actively in the building. And so, like, when we're doing the tutoring with SOARS, our staff are showing up and they are working with the tutors, and we're involved. So when our kids reoffend, I think for a lot of our staff, there is, much like with a parent, there's a bit of disappointment there, especially if we find that the youth did in fact, commit the act. And I do want to underscore that there's a lot of personal investment in the work that we do across URS and CSS. And I don't know that that gets that it resonates as it should, that the personal investment that we bring to the work that we do. But when if a young person does reoffend, they can be charged again. And in some instances, the charges may not go forward. When we look at recidivism on a data concept, we're looking at on the data construct, we're looking at not just the arrest, but also the petitioning, right? And there's another aspect of that, which is, did the case in fact go forward? So oftentimes we will reassess, we will do a family group conference, we gather additional information, we look at the service plan, what do we need to be thinking about adjusting, enhancing, what new or different aspects do we need to in fact bring to the table? And the last thing I think I want to point out is that, a lot of emphasis is on the data analysis itself, but not always on what does the data portend, what does it tell us, where do we go with it? And so in those instances where offenses, and in particular assaults, are occurring and they're not going forward, there is still an obligation. And this is why we're so glad to be working with Cure the Streets, Violent Interrupters, and the ones Incredible Messages, because for a number of people as a victim, especially if you're a young person, your hope in some healing or resolution comes in the expectation that there will be an accountability response. And so if that process doesn't happen, what we see sometimes in the community leads to retaliation, and what starts in the street can spill into the school, what starts in the school can spill into the streets, and it even flows into our facilities. And so I want to underscore the importance of recidivism, and we put a high premium on that as it relates to what the data tells us, but it's also an opportunity to dig deeper and to assess whether or not more needs to be done with that youth and infant.
Related, you're talking about recidivism, so if someone's rearrested, or like you said, because not everyone who's arrested is actually prosecuted, so they're prosecuted or petitioned. So for each of you, for your agencies, what is success? What would you deem success when it comes to supervision and care of system adults?
I'll start with that. And this is something that we need to do a better job of measuring. But success for us, recidivism is not a measure of success, it's a measure of failure. And so success looks like a young person getting a job, a young person supporting a family, having a stable home, completing some educational goals, whether that's high school, college, or vocational training, getting certified as a carpenter, as a mason, getting the skills to be productive and a supportive part of the community. That's what success looks like to me. And those are the things that we need to really look at and measure, because, you know, recidivism is the most unforgiving measure, because you could have a young person that came through either of our doors or both of our doors, and 6 months later commit a new offense. Forever in the data, they're a recidivist. But if 2 years later, they're graduating, and 4 years later, they are employed in a great job, and they're being a first-time homeowner, and they have a family, I would call that person a success. Even though in our data, they will be marked as a failure forever. So we need to look at both.
What is success for social services?
I would associate, CSSD with the responses that Director Abed offered. And I would say that for us, because remember, our youth is going to be a little bit younger, right? Than there's an older teenager, pre-adult population that DRS is looking at. For us, we're measuring it in some real tangible ways that are about how our adolescents come to us. We've got a ninth grader who is reading at a first grade level and doing math at a second grade level. Success for us is going to be in that time to go working with them. How do we get that GPA, that grade level? How do we bridge that? How do we create the launching pad? Because we don't have a whole lot of time, right? In terms of when we're working with our young people as it relates to what the statute offers us. And so turning attendance around in school, but not just that the young people are going to the building, that we're hopefully able to inspire and help them discover a love for learning, right? And that our learning institutions are open to the possibility that not everybody learns in a very a concrete way, right? For some of our young people, those smaller settings are what works for us. Being able to see families that evolve and transcend over issues that can affect how they interact with their young people and how they interact with one another. So we have some baseline ways that we measure that school attendance improves, school academic performance, curfew checks, more young people are home, home checks, school visits, again, youth are attending school, do youth matriculate from one grade to another? But I think that the overarching part of that, and that's why I was moved by what Director Abed said, that we have to broaden how we are looking at success. And we have to really look at what we're measuring. What are the real tangible accomplishments that can provide some insight that what we're doing is working. And we have to be bold enough and courageous enough to be willing to amend and change some of what we're doing if it's not helping us get to those points.
Okay. Now I'm going to pause just to see if there are any questions. No, do my check. Then I have a question. You started to talk about this, I think both of you, but I want to ask explicitly, what are the greatest challenges for the youth that you're supervising?
So I'll start with, I think one of the biggest challenges they face is the stigmatization that they incur when they are involved in our system. Even though the information about our involvement is confidential, communities know which kids are involved in our system. Communities know, and their peers know who got arrested and who got taken into the system. And when they leave, if they are committed to DYRS, we do a lot of work, and there is a lot of change in their the way that they see things and the way that they operate and the way that they behave. But the community often remembers the kid that left and doesn't know the kid that's returning. And I think that is a huge challenge that we have, that our kids have, in how they reintegrate into the community, that we really need to help support them.
What about court social services? You supervise, what are some of their greatest challenges?
I think it varies, for a number of our youth. The absence of two dedicated adults in the household, can be a challenge. We are looking at the ACEs, right? The alternative childhood experiences, and those two provide some challenges. But what we do know that the literature and the science tells us is that even with the absence of two adults in a home, that you fare better in their development if they have at least one adult that is just dedicated, right? The literature is just crazy about them, just like won't give up, right? And won't give in. And so some of the challenges that we find is breaking down the resistance at the onset. And if you can put yourself in the mindset of a lot of our young people, from infancy, elementary school, on to middle school and high school, there have been a variety of family members, right, members of the community, a variety of individuals coming and going, right? And for whatever reason, the nature of the longing relationships tend to ebb and flow. And we operate and live in a world that often says, look but don't touch, touch but don't taste, taste but don't enjoy, right? And so some of the challenges are really getting our young people to open, lower their guard, lower their resistance, to allow us to be able to build a rapport with them. And then the challenge on us is literally to be person-centered, right? To go where our young people are, right? To be bold enough to go where they are, to build that rapport, and then guide them. And this is why I want to briefly just mention our SOARS programs, succeeding in our academic responsibility. This is like an after-school enrichment program that's really based on volunteerism in many ways. It's court employees who have the full day of work come to our facilities and engage in partnering with our tutoring, our tutors, and working with our young people. And I will tell you, when I say court employees, I work with the court, our deputy clerk of the court, our executive officer, they're coming, right? Our court employees from civil, from probate, from different parts of the court. And that program is just like our BARGE program. You can see the transformation. Because we get a lot of resistance, but over time, the consistency, young people realize we're not going to give up on them, that we can see potential and hold them accountable. Because our young people will push the limits. One of them pissed me off last week, and I had to say to the CSO, "Come on, I need you to help me. This young person right here, you need a timeout." Because sometimes you have to basically help a young person understand that if we let you not achieve, it's like a cold, right? It's like sneezing. The other young people kind of feel like, well, we don't have to achieve. So those are some of the challenges. But I will say this, what inspires me in the work that we do and the men and women that we work with is the commitment. We have tough skin, right? We've all been bombed out, cursed out, right? Chewed out, but we don't give up and we don't give in. And so the challenges are real and they're there. But I think our commitment in the work that we do helps us with those challenges.
There's actually a question from online. It's a little sensitive, but you just talk about it's challenging. This is challenging work. And so question says, several months ago, there have been news articles about some low morale among court social services staff, maybe lack of retention or support. Do you think it's impacting public safety, and what's being done to address some of these issues?
No, I don't think it's impacting public safety. And I think that's a very important question. We do a lot in the court has invested a lot in building and sustaining workplace culture and building a great place to work. And we have some very key values that are our North Star in the work that we do. And so I would say that when you look at it, that's a very important question, when you look at the context of, and I remember that period, I think it was in December, coming out of 2023, we've come out of a pandemic, unprecedented in 100 years, right? We were turning back on our system and then having to turn it off. and returning it on in partial ways, and then having to hit reset buttons. And I think that the concerned rates offered us an opportunity to, as we do with our young people and as we do with services that we offer, it offered us an opportunity to look at what we're doing and how we're doing it, and those areas in which additional improvements can be made. I often cite two individuals whose words have moved me the most. And that is when he says, find a job that you love and you'll never have to look for work again. And Bill Gates says, even a good thing can be made better. And so even in that period where, in truth, we have morale issues and we had some at that point, what we also had was a leadership within the court at the executive level, among the leadership within court social services that faced it head on. And out of that, a number of initiatives, a number of trainings, a number of efforts and measures that we feel are helping to propel us forward have come out.
I have a number of questions that just came in from online, so let me try to get to those. So, we've talked about jobs and talked about the Marysville Summer Youth Employment Program. Do you have a sense of how many youth under your supervision are able to get jobs? But maybe more specifically, what are your agencies able to do to help youth acquire jobs and at least for their level of job prep?
So, yeah, training is key. We have to get, it's all education. So whether you're talking about high school education or vocational training, that's all education in my building. Some of the programs that we operate, like the one that I highlighted earlier, Gold Academy, and our partnership with First Choice Masonry, all of the kids that, I should say, all of the young people, because these are generally older and would be considered adults in law, that participated and completed that program were offered a job at the end by the employer, which is one of the reasons I think they're just an amazing company, and that's why I keep coming back and highlighting it. It's not, we can't guarantee jobs for everyone. Summer youth employment will give them a job for the summertime and expose them to careers. But generally, we're looking to, work with those older, or I should say, younger adults, have younger kids. They do have to go to school, go back into and while they're with us. So it's a segment of the population that we can work with. And we do have job training that we're expanding. So one of the things I haven't yet mentioned is the Oasis Reserve, which is a sort of sub-campus New Beginnings, or on the grounds of New Beginnings, where we're developing programming. Initially, it was designed for younger kids, middle school aged kids that were not system involved, as a way to deter them from becoming system involved and provide supports through educational supports, giving them tutoring if they're struggling academically, and also giving them opportunities to engage in the program at Oasis. Oasis has road scores. We have Little Hudson River, so they're sort of recreational activities. But we're also building a carpentry program, blacksmithing program. Want to be able to offer young people a longer-term opportunity to engage in those programs, because with job training, I think the most effective thing that we can do is get a young person certified in something, whether it's blacksmithing or carpentry or plumbing or HVAC, because that is very marketable. But it takes a long time. It takes about 3 years to get to become a carpenter in skilled trades, become a plumber. And so we need to have a long-term engagement with those young people. And that means that when we provide them that job training, we also have to provide them financial support. And so I don't know anybody, I say in air quotes, and not getting paid. That's what a lot of job training programs kind of offer. So we're trying to change that by offering stipends and even looking at ways that we can provide other supports like housing while they're getting that training to try to take the load off so that they can get those certifications of self-sufficient.
I'm going to go to the next question, and if each of you could respond. So in the district, we've been talking a lot about truancy. And so specifically for the youth under your supervision, what are you doing to help promote their school attendance and avoid truancy? So I'll start with you, Director.
So the SOARS initiative is an example. So when we launched that, and this was born out of an idea that our chief judge, Leader Joseph Herring, envisioned, and a lot of her tenure, as presiding judge, deputy presiding judge, associate judge over her career, did involve efforts to address this, including the Byron model, which was done in partnership with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council and working with schools. But the SOARS initiative, when we started it last year, we were housed at the Southwest Vocation Center. And we were seeking young people from across the city, but most people, I think all of them last year were males. And one of the things that we said we wanted to do was to expand on that. And this is the young people who are under our supervision, right? Who we find out are not going to school as they should, right? And maybe going to the building, but not going to the class, right? And there's the 80-20-20-80 rule with respect to whether you're going to be counted as absent or not. And so this year, we begin SOARS in March at the Northeast Rocket Center on Beach, and that's receiving male and female kids, right, under us, co-ed. And it's our young people from the Northeast quadrant and from the Northwest quadrant. And again, we have 6 Rocket Centers. In May, this month, the 20th, we're looking to go live with working with our young Southeast and Southwest and those with adolescent girls and boys. Because for the most part, if you have a delinquent matter, you're likely not going to have a truancy referral come to us because you already have a court involvement. And if in fact you do, it's unlikely that there would be a formal adjudication or court involvement with respect to that. But a great level of the emphasis that we're placing where our young people is on literacy and is on really trying to combat, to reduce, toward combating truancy and absenteeism among the young people that are under our supervision.
So for us, I mean, with committed kids, they're in our care and they're in our custody. So they compulsory must go to school, and we control that. But the way that we really interface with the community around this issue is through the OASIS program. So we do have all the recreational activities at the site. A lot of the work and our staff many of those OASIS staff are actually certified teachers or former teachers. And so the work is done in collaboration with OSSI, with the public school system. They actually identify our kids that we work with. These are not system-involved kids. They haven't committed crimes, but typically they're looking at kids that have academic challenges or struggling academically or are having issues behaviorally with attendance. And so we connect with those young people. They become part of our cohorts. These are middle school age kids, and we're trying to get them early before that break with school has occurred and provide those additional supports. So a lot of the work is actually done in the school with OASIS and is in the form of tutoring, meeting them after school, providing that academic support, and then using the recreational piece as the reward for participating.
So for youth who are under your supervision, if they are chronically absent or truant, how would your agencies find out? How would your probation officers learn if a youth in their care is chronically absent?
Home visits. We do this home visits for our young people. We also obtain the academic attendance records and the academic progress reports from one semester to another. So, but then when a lot of our young people will tell their young that they're not homeless, but they haven't homeless. And then it's all for our parents. So it's a number of sources, but in terms of the actual, documented days that are missed, when that occurs, we would get that actually in our relationship with the school. And a number of our fields have developed a relationship. They've dated the kids out before the kid reports to go, like, go to school. School does.
Right. I have a question here of, for nonprofit organizations or even just community members who want to get involved, want to support the work that your agencies can do. What are opportunities for them to support the work of DRS, for the public and nonprofits to support the work of social services?
Well, the court has a mechanism where individuals who have an interest in volunteering, just in volunteering, where the court is concerned, and we can provide that information, the contact number and information, that individual, you know, or that agency or organization, will contact us and we would sit down. The court will determine what the interest is, and if it's where court social services are concerned, just like our staff, you know, background checks, clearances, things of that nature, all of that would have to be communicated, and it would be determined whether this is something that we want to do as a pilot, right, a trial. If it works well, it could lead to an agreement, right, around sort of designated dates and things of that nature. If you're talking about internships with college students and things of that nature are concerned, that has a different vehicle, because then you're working under the charge and supervision of individuals. But I would say the door is open. There is a welcoming opportunity to it. It's just a matter of folks conveying the interest and the intentionality, and then having the discussion with the right folks within the court to be able to look at how we roll it out.
So we don't have a specified volunteer group. So we need to look into. So currently, people come to me and offer their volunteerism, and that's how it has happened in the past 9 months. And we have worked together with a number of community-based organizations. I will say that most of these organizations have had historic ties with us. I mentioned Parent Watch. We have a group called the Elders Council, and this is a group that has been working with the agency for years, but it is very focused on finding opportunities to bring our city elders together to work with our young people. And I was having a conversation earlier about this, and even though I think the perception that young people don't respect their elders anymore, I think that's a perception that every generation has of young people. Older generations look back and say these young kids don't respect, but they really do. We bring folks in with lived experience, and they engage with them. You see them listening, you see them engaged, and so there's opportunities are there. But right now, bring them to me.
In terms of nonprofits, being able to support your work, there is a question, what is the Credible Messenger program? And then how does the Credible Messenger program support community and detained youth at DRS?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because we do use credible messengers, both within our operations, but also in schools. So it does come back to some of the earlier questions about truancy. We do use credible messengers and partner with the school system to engage with young people. So we have a number of ways. We have some that are on staff. We could in-house credible messengers, and we also have contracts with 7 different entities that recruit and retain credible messengers. And one of the main functions that we use credible messengers for in facilities is to help facilitate our treatment programs, to meet with young people and de-escalate situations and address conflicts. Conflict resolution is a big part of that. Program. And the credible messenger team solution tactics and interventions that we've used to try to bring in members of the community, get their familiar with young people respect, and work together with our kids in facilities to explain to them that these sort of long-held community beliefs don't need to continue. And again, bringing those elders and those credible messengers together to communicate that what you're doing right now, very silly, you're thinking you're representing your neighborhood, but you're not. And so they are major partners.
And then there's a question about how are your staff trained, specifically probation staff, as well as shelter house staff. Who trains them and who provides them? So maybe I'll start with shelter house staff. And so I know this is one of those unique, how you said you're very close, intertwined in your work. So we know that if you're in a shelter house, you're a pre-adjudicated youth, so you've not been found involved at that point. So you're under court social services supervision, but the shelter houses are under contract by DRS.
So yeah, let me that is the sort of split that we have here. And DYRS does do the contracting, so we are the procurers of the shelter homes. But as Director Love mentioned, it's court social services that supervises the youth when they are placed in shelter. And so the way that we do that is working together. As Director Odom mentioned, we have to collaborate to do that. So when we go through that procurement, Director Odom's team is part of that process to evaluate those shelter providers. Then we have a contract monitoring team that works with them, and we develop the components of the contract to meet the needs for social services and what they require. So even though we are the ones that procure it, we need to defer to court social services on, all right, what exactly are we going to do with these young people? And a lot of the time that kids are in shelter, they're going to school during the day. So the shelter will be taking them to community school. And then after they go to school, they're going to be going to the barges and being supervised by Director Odom's team, into the evening.
In terms of training for shelter house staff, who would be responsible for providing that training?
But the Director of Ed said it would be a joint effort. So one of the things that we're talking about is being able to look at the training and how court social services can play a more intentional role in that orientation. And we have to think that one of the things that we want to make sure folks appreciate is that shelter or congregate care homes are 24-hour facilities. So you want to train all the staff across the different tools, and that can be a bit, difficult. But we are having conversations around, we see it more as sort of orientation and looking at particular areas in the operation where we feel that there is a need. But ultimately, as I understand it, and it's been a minute, some years actually, since I was with DYRS, why I say as deputy administrator, it is the responsibility of the contractor to train their staff, right? So once we have the background checks and things of that nature, yes, the DYRS and the court social services have an obligation in the orientation and training that they understand how the court process works, the legal measures, the programming and things of that nature. And so I can't give you a specific, but I can tell you it does occur, right? And I can tell you there's conversations that are occurring to look at a more structured way with routine interfacing around that. Now, as it relates to training for probation officers, I can answer that. Our probation officers, when, and it's our probation officers, our electronic monitoring delinquency prevention technicians, our clinicians from the clinic, our deputy clerks. When we do the rotation, the recruitment, we typically are bringing in what we call cohorts. So it's rarely going to be a one and done, right? It's usually anywhere from 2, 3 to sometimes 8 or more positions. And so in bringing in the cohorts, we have what's called the Court Social Services Academy. And that's a structured, intensive 2-week academy, going from soup to nuts in terms of how young people come through the process. It begins with intake and screening. It goes on to supervision, pre-trial, post-disposition. So that's it's a didactic modeling, experiential, tell, show, do. And so a lot of it is actual lecturing and information. We're arming them with various information around the different screenings, the tools and things that we're using. We have our standard operating procedure manual that also provides a great deal of information. And then from that 2-week training, our POs are typically going to be paired with a more senior probation officer. And so there's shadowing and mentoring that's actually going on. And it's the responsibility of our supervisors for our teams to ensure that in that 1-year probationary period, this is new individuals coming on, right? That the training and support to ensure that our staff are becoming proficient, right? In the work that they're doing, because we have career ladder positions. But the ongoing training is something that we've been expanding. And so one of the things we're going to be doing is looking out these like rolling clinics that are refresher training courses. But in our academy and in the training, we're also doing TAC2 training, right? Tactical aggression, to be able to redirect our young people. The various services and supports that we offer, we do focus a lot on training. And then there are the specialty trainings, like for example, our child guidance clinic, our clinicians and our doctoral interns, they go to an annual training every year as a part of the accreditation for the internship program. So there are varying trainings that are built onto the actual structured training that everyone is participating in.
Okay, and then Director Abed, I have a question for you. So there's been numerous reports of staff retention and the impact on DYRS's ability to effectively serve detained and community released youth and ensure their safety, both in the facilities and the community. So I guess the question is, how are you addressing staff retention and helping to avoid or minimize any negative impact on service for youth?
Sure. And with facilities, there is always a sort of elevated level of turnover. They're very difficult jobs, and they are jobs that have a tremendous amount of scrutiny over. But the thing that drives turnover in the facilities probably the most is when you don't have stability in the schedule. In other words, you come in, you're assigned to a particular shift, and then you get drafted to stay over again and again. And that happens enough times, and you miss birthday parties for your children, you miss significant events in your family's life, and that's going to drive the turnover. So what we're doing to address that, number one, the mayor has supported us and put 21 additional positions into our budget that we hope the city council will maintain and pass when the budget is completed. We need to hire additional staff so that we can reduce the amount of drafts. We also have a high number of individuals that are unavailable for service. And what that means is they are on some kind of protected leave. And that means that they're occupying a position, but they're not available to work. And so we have established a return to work coordinator to work through all of those. Some of those are legitimate claims of workers' compensation claims. People get injured in the line of duty. Those are absolutely legitimate, and we should support those folks. But if they are injured to the point that they cannot continue to work, then we need to move them off of our roles and into a disability situation so that we can go then and recruit for those positions, because we need those people back to work. We also have folks that are abusing those systems. And so that return to work coordinator is going to ensure that we are reviewing all the documentation and making sure that we get people back to work, and if they are misusing the system, that we identify them and move them off of our rules as well.
Another question, and we also have been talking a lot about safe passage for our young people. who may be afraid to commute to school because they view just the commute itself as dangerous. And so the question is, to support social services, and I'll add DRS as well. Do you all provide transportation to help the youth that you're supervising in the community be able to safely commute to school?
So we use resources from the public safety ecosystem. And there is a program called Safe Passages that is utilized to try to ensure that young people are safe. I don't know that we are directly providing those transportation services, but we do utilize the district services to get people to school. We have Safe Passages workers that will be stationed at our station. They're not our employees, but they are district employees for contractors of the district through our partner agencies that ensure we get kids to school and we get them there safe.
Excellent question. So in our milieu and in the day-to-day operations, we do not transport kids to school in the sense of going to the home and then loading them up and transporting them to our school. Our kids are located throughout the city. What we do with respect to transportation is to get from school to our after-school programming. We do work with our vendors, and we do offer provide transportation because that is one of the key concerns that are raised a lot of times by our young people and by our parents. And that is that I have to go through neighborhoods that have some concerns about our safety. And so the transportation we are able to provide with our contract vendors has done wonders in our ability to have a higher attendance with our young people coming to our program. Because we got to get our young people to where we want them to go and then be able to engage in it. So that's the transportation oftentimes to the facility as well as home from the facility. We have worked with MPD and with ones and other public safety partners where safe passages zones are concerned. We have been present to deter any threats and risks to public safety where our young people are concerned. And that has largely been around the dismissal time. But there have been times when we've also been present in the AM as well.
Okay. And then a question, we have been talking a lot about accountability. I feel like the public discourse about persons who have committed offenses and holding them accountable. So I guess in each of your contexts, what does accountability look like? So what does accountability look like for someone under DRS's care? What does accountability look like for someone supervised by social services? I'll start with DRS.
Yeah, so, when you're with us, you're being held accountable. That means you've been adjudicated delinquent and you've been committed to the agency. And so accountability for us is rehabilitation. That is what our role is. The punishment phase has already been implemented when you got committed. You're confined. You're not free to leave. So that's already embedded by the fact that you're with us. And I would argue even on probation, you may not be incarcerated, but you are restricted and you have lost some of your freedom. And so I'll just speak for DYRS. What we're trying to do is rehabilitate and bring young people back into the community that can be law-abiding, that can be productive members. That's how I view it.
I would agree with Director Bill, and I would say that building the competencies in which our young people are really aware of the impact of their actions is also a part of accountability. Because the higher the consciousness, the less likely to engage in and act that way. But I agree with Director Abed going through the process. Right, there are phases to accountability. Right, the arrest, the fact that you cannot just leave in that moment. Right, the whole process and the engagement in the programming, and I think the raising of awareness and guiding our young people to a point of really active interactions. And in some instances that does involve and then being able to interface either with the person who's harmed or sometimes a surrogate. I'm not saying we get it done right all the time, but I think we have had a lot of experience where we have done it, and you can see the transformative value of that. But I think that accountability is, as Director Ben said, it takes on many forms. Just as I think community service does, service learning, tutoring someone who's struggling in an area. But not a lot of our young people are very bright, very dynamic, and doing very well in school. So there's a host of ways that we are addressing.
And then two more questions from me, and then we're going to wrap it up unless I see a hand raised or another question come in from online, which maybe just happened. So let me take a look.
Question.
Yeah, well, before I'll get a chance to read this, but also, as you know, we just had a major crime bill passed earlier this year, and there were predecessors to that bill passed last summer. And I feel like in the public discourse, we would hear stories like, someone committed an offense, and then we hear in the media, oh, and they were under supervision, and they were on a GPS device, indicating that how could this happen? How could people under supervision commit offenses, especially when they have a GPS device on them? And the implication there is that you're able to do some intense tracking and monitoring. How do you respond to that? So, in a way, it's sort of casting some blame in a way.
No.
How do you respond? What's the reasonable expectation?
I'll just say that a GPS device isn't going to prevent someone from doing something. It will detect where they are, and we will know whether they're supposed to be or not. But it's not like it can talk to a young person and say, hey, don't do this. This is not right. And so with GPS, what we have done is create a rapid response team. And what we want to do with GPS is deter that thing from happening before it happens. So the rapid response team is a 24-hour operation, and young people that are on GPS, when they get an alert, and when their rapid response team gets an alert that they are, say, in an exclusion zone, where they are prohibited from being, they're immediately going to respond. First thing they need to do is call that young person. What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be there. And understand what's going on. Now, it could be that they were riding a bus from an activity that they were sanctioned to go to, and it happened to ride through an area. Okay, we can resolve that. If they are not charging their device because they want to plan something later. We know that they're not charging their device. We're going to call them. We're going to call their parents. And you need to put your device on the charger. And if they don't, we're going to send somebody out there. We're going to check on you. If they've cut their device off, we're going to go and get a custody room right away and look to partner with MPD and bring them in. So we may not be able to prevent anything from happening, but we can respond quickly in the moment. And I think that is the best that we can do to try to prevent anything from escalating. Because I think when we don't respond in the moment, it sends a message to a young person, hey, I didn't charge my device, nothing happened. Hey, I went into this community, nothing happened. And they can escalate and go further and further and further. And that's why we have to, as soon as they violate something, that doesn't mean we go and arrest them right away. We need to check. We need to check with them, check with their parents. And if they can't be accounted for and we can't resolve it, yeah, we need to go look for them and bring them in.
How would you respond to questions about how could someone under supervision on a GPS commit?
I think I agree with everything that Director Abed said, but I think we found ourselves in a situation where at a particular point in time, what we needed from the technology, there were some limitations. And we realized that we had to retool and revamp our approach in the frequency of interface with our young people. Technology can be neither smart nor stupid. but humans. As we develop it, we grow. So we were never gonna, as Director Abed said, kind of be in the best position if we were just as a municipality relying on that. And so what I was pleased to see, well, and let me say this, we acknowledge that it was a failure. That 5 of our young people, whose lives were cut short, had our equipment issued by the court, and the lifespan of the equipment, which typically the battery hold was about 48 hours, right? And if the batteries weren't being charged with the frequency as required, then that battery life was not going to sustain. And the tragedy is that the lives were cut short. Had the battery life been charged, it would not have deterred, as Director alluded to, where a person would move to. So what battery showed us was that a particular young person was in a location, but it would not have communicated to us whether they were, for example, operating a vehicle illegally, if in fact they were fleeing in an effort to elude the police, and that could have led to a collision. But one of the things that we did within Court Social Services was we looked at our curfew monitoring structure in tandem with our electronic monitoring system. Right, and so we were under an effort to, through a solicitation, acquire equipment with a stronger life cycle. Because 2 days is just simply not enough. The equipment we have now through the vendor that we have, a single charge will give you 5 days. And if you charge more now, you're bringing it up to 50%. So you get that, the value of the time. But I would also say, because I know you have another question you want to get to, is that we retooled our curfew monitoring. Prior to that, an intensive supervision, you've got 2 checks a week. Someone that was on regular supervision but was a higher level of it, we give 1 visit a week. Medium was a visit every other week, and low was a visit once a week. We retooled all of that. And so on any given night of the week, that team is supervising those kids. They never know what day we're coming. They don't know who's coming. It's no longer just your probation officer. We even had some parents say, wait a minute, you're coming a little too much, right? And that's understandable. And so again, any loss of a young person's life is painful, it's regretful. And we regret that there was the malfunction with well, not malfunction, there was the lack of function with the equipment as it relates to the charge. But I will say that out of that, there was a great commitment that emerged, and we have retooled how we operate and the use of the equipment, the GPS, longer lifespan, equipment with greater features, to send pings, to send charges, to send alerts, things of that nature, to Director Abed's point, a proactive preventive measure. And in an ideal world, we won't have to rely on that equipment in the volume of numbers that we do.
Okay, thank you. And the question that came in, I think Director Abed, you had addressed it. It was relating to attrition at URS. How are you managing it? And then also, you know, the impact that it may be having on recruitment. I felt like you addressed that to some extent. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
No, you know, we have robust recruitment. We fill positions rather quickly. But I think the thing that burns people out is that schedule. And so having the additional positions and the support of the mayor's office to bolster our numbers is going to go a long way in giving that consistency in that schedule.
Okay. And then my final, you all experience loops directly when it's happened. I mean, you feel that personally, I'm sure your staff do. So I'm going to try to end us on a little bit of a high note. And I was at a session the other day, and the moderator asked the final question, what gives you hope? So I'm going to ask that question to both of you. What gives you hope about our young people? especially the system involved? What gives you?
over about 20 years over the course of my career. And one of the benefits of having that length of tenure is that I get opportunities to run into young people that I've encountered in our systems in the community. And it is the most gratifying thing because every interaction that I've had with a young person has been positive. And invariably, what they want to tell me is, hey, Mr. Abed, I want to let you know that I graduated from high school. I want to let you know that I'm married and I have 2 kids. And they show me pictures of their children. They tell me about their jobs. They tell me about their successes. And I want to capture that. And that's where I feel like we haven't done a good job in capturing success. We do a lot of capturing failure, but we don't do a great job capturing success. But having those interactions is what keeps me coming back because I know a lot of our kids, when they mature and they have the opportunity to thrive, they do well. And that's what gives me.
Director Odom. Knowing, we typically are working with a shorter, like smaller period of time. And so one of the things that I really endeavor to stress is that for us, we're planting seeds. We're planting seeds in the soil with the commitment towards transformation. And that's not about, you know, just a reason or a season, but ultimately, if we get it right, we see the growth coming out of the soil over the course of a lifetime. It is certainly, our young people graduated from school. In some instances, we've even done our own in-house graduations, right? With young people. So the accomplishments with our young people, to see them come back as they go into college, many of our young people do, or take on trades in schools. To see communities transform the investment that our staff have in a lot of young people, and that they really do. Many of them treat our young people as they would treat their own. And you know, in the work that I've been doing, and you acknowledged it earlier, right? That I've been in 2005, and so in what is my 20th year, I think what gives me hope is the leadership team that we built with social services. To look at succession development and to know that there are good stewards in the work that we're doing, and so that my time of moving on, so that new leadership can come and emerge. I am hopeful and I am confident in the human capital, the investment in the season. And the various stakeholders and champions that
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I will take a photo. I appreciate your response. Thank you to everybody that first heard you. I think you received the survey. Please fill out the survey. Give us feedback. Give us your ideas for future public meeting topics. And please be safe and have a great rest of your evening. Take care.